comic books are going woke.
Oh, yeah.
I remember a New Warriors when Marvel actually created characters Snowflake and Safe Space.
The new Warriors.
Yeah, super cringe. And so here comes this guy Eric July, and he's like, I'm gonna make just like regular comics, and bang, you're a millionaire.
It happened literally just like that. You word it that way, but that's exactly how it happened. I just kind of, obviously we have this like Rippaverse code of ethics is what we call it. And it's more of a guideline where my folks and the other writers and everything, where we say, this is who we are. This is what we're going to abide by, and this is something that the audience can hold us to. And in it, we talk about some of the other issues, because a lot of it was content-related problems. You talk about what is woke, but there's other issues that I had with comic books as well, continuity issues. But yeah, that demand, the Rippaverse showed that demand was truly there. People have watched their characters, especially with the big two, be just completely bastardized, and they wanted an alternative, man.
They made like the son of Superman is gay, things like that.
Yeah, and Tim Drake is gay now.
Really?
Oh yeah, Tim Drake's gay now.
Wow.
Yeah, he's or bisexual. I mean,
yeah, Tim Drake and the son of Superman.
Yes, and it's funny how that works.
It's like, dude, make new characters.
Yeah, exactly.
That was always my thing, and I see a lot of people saying the same thing. I'm like, dude, I don't care if you make a character who is like LGBTQ, black, white, Asian, whatever. Just make the character.
Yeah.
Don't take Iron Man and turn Iron Man into a black woman.
Yeah.
What were like your top comics in the beginning?
In the beginning for sure. It was Flash, while it was Flash coming up, but all that Detective Comic stuff that Chuck ironically was writing at the time, Chuck Dixon. That was around the time you also had like Nightfall and Bane, all that. Like, man, what a time to kind of come up during that window.
When Batman had his back broken.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
You know,
people that was huge.
Well, hello, kiddies. This is your friendly neighborhood watchman again, and today we'll be talking about comic books and writer Chuck Dixon's opinions that the X-Men comic books have not always been woke. So without further ado, we'll just jump right into this article from Bounding Into Comics by our familiar John F. Trent with the heading, Chuck Dixon rebukes claims that the X-Men and comics have always been woke. Yeah, these leftist twits want to claim everything's been woke before that term even existed. Legendary comic book writer Chuck Dixon, known for his runs on Batman, Punisher, Conan, Robin, Birds of Prey, and more recently, rebuked claims that the X-Men have always been woke. A part of his ongoing Ask Chuck Dixon series, Rising Star Comics queried Dixon, quote, "What do you think when people use X-Men as an example of how comics were always woke/political, end quote." The questioner added, "To me personally, I always thought that was a weak argument that had no basis in actual fact, because in X-Men, up until the aughts, the racism angle wasn't even that core to the X-Men as a whole. It was an action, adventure, superhero, sci-fi, fantasy, romantic soap opera, with everything and the kitchen sink, ain't that the truth, that had an outsider theme on top of it. Plus, X-Men was often very un-PC, definitely not woke, as evident when the same people who parrot that line tried to cancel Chris Claremont last year. Chris Claremont's legendary tenure as writer of the X-Men lasted all the way from 1975 to 1991. He would go on later to reunite with the book X-Men characters in the future, such as a 2-year run back in 2004. But he went on to write other books. For instance, he took over writing duties for the Fantastic Four back in 1998 for over 2 years. And he would go on to write for other publishers besides Marvel. But he'll always be known for his long run as the X-Men scribe and helped make them the superhero team of the comic book industry. And he helped popularize Wolverine. Claremont will go on a legendary run with John Byrne, which included industry-famous storylines such as the Dark Phoenix Saga and Days of Future Past. One of my favorite post-John Byrne artists was Paul Smith. Unfortunately, he didn't stay on the book very long. In 1991, Marvel will publish a new X-Men book with Claremont again as writer, working with a new, younger artist, famous in his own right, a Generation Xer, by the name of Jim Lee. That book will go down in the Guinness Book of World Records as the best-selling comic book of all time, with over 8.1 million sold. But I digress. Back to the article. Dixon responded, "It's funny, isn't it? The thing about wokeism and political correctness and all the rest of it is the goalposts are always moving." End quote.
He ain't lying.
I don't know Chris Claremont's politics, but I'll bet you he was pretty much in line with the woke crowd until whatever it was he said or did made them turn on him, Dixon said. Yeah, they eat their own, like what happened with J.K. Rowling. They turned on her. First issue of the X-Men. And that's another thing. Stan Lee, and they kind of, I can't blame him. Stan Lee, he tried to retrofit how after the fact, when it was a feather in your cap to say so, he said that Professor X, the leader of the X-Men, was MLK, was Martin Luther King, and Magneto was Malcolm X. Fighting for mutants' rights. But it wasn't like that at all. Anybody that knows the history of comic books knows that Magneto was just a typical villain, that's all, who happened to be a mutant just like the heroes he was fighting against, which are the X-Men. But I digress. When you take the X-Men, the original X-Men in particular, who I saw as a pack of whiners, and now you make them victims, like professional victims, he continued. And I agree with you that the outsider element is cool, but the outsider element is part of every superhero story, isn't it? They have a secret identity, they have an alter ego. Of course, they are an outsider. But taking it this far and then saying the comics are always political, they may have dealt with the issues of the day, he stated. I was on a podcast with John Bauer recently, and he brought up the fact that the X-Men would often have discussion about religious faith because Kitty Pryde was a Jew, Colossus was an atheist, Kurt, aka Nightcrawler, was a Catholic, and they would have discussions about these things. And this image right here is the hands of Kurt Wagner, Nightcrawler. And it wasn't trying to tell the reader what to think on those subjects. See, that's important. It was simply the characters exploring these issues, and it made them seem deeper, more relatable, more real. That they had thoughts like this. That these were independently thinking characters instead of just people on paper, Dixon elaborated. That's a great point made by Mr. Dixon. And the thing is, I'll hear the argument. Well, Superman was political. Superman, he was a big FDR liberal because he would harass abusive, greedy landlords. That's positing the argument that there's someone who likes greedy landlords. How is that political? Who likes greedy landlords? Nobody does, Dixon asserted. Unless you're the landlord.
Daddy, chill.
So that's not political, he said. That's Superman being a vigilante crime fighter, standing for truth, justice, and the American way. The American way certainly isn't high rents and throwing orphans into the street. That ain't the American way. So there's nothing really political. Another great point. And here's a story on that greedy landlord. The caption here is Superman beats up a wife beater in Action Comics number 1, 1938. For those that may not know, that's the first appearance of Superman. And maybe politics are part of a story, but that doesn't excuse your injecting your agenda, your political agenda, your personal point of view into superhero stories, and telling the reader what to think, or shaming the reader, or literally shaming the reader. He added, hell yeah. Agree 100 with you, Chuck. Amen, brother. Amen. Telling readers that if you don't agree with my political stance, or the political stance that I've put in the mouth of Wolverine or Batman, then I don't want you reading my comics. It's divisive, he said. Comics were never meant to be divisive. They have universal themes, and there are characters you agree with and characters you don't. Wolverine challenges the Hulk and Wendigo to fight in The Incredible Hulk number 180. That's the first appearance of Wolverine. Technically, he comes in at the last page. I actually have the next issue, Hulk number 181, where we have the proper introduction of Wolverine throughout the whole book. But let me get back on track here.
Stay on target.
Don't tell me what to do. He then provided examples. Daredevil's always been the bleeding heart liberal. Frank Castle has always been the direct opposite. You can argue about Batman's politics or Ben Grimm's politics, but in the end, it's about escapist fiction, Dixon concluded. What do you make of Chuck Dixon's rebuke of the claims that the X-Men and the comics have always been woke? Well, you've been hearing my little comments while reading through the article. I'm in sync with Chuck Dixon. I agree with him 100%. No more to say. I see eye to eye with him about it. So folks, if you also happen to agree with Chuck Dixon and myself, then click on that like button and help out the channel by subscribing if you haven't already. And for shame if you haven't. And click on the notification bell so that you'll always be forewarned whenever I'm about to drop another video. And as always, stay safe and I bid you peace.
Superman! Batman and Robin! Wonder Woman! Aquaman!
And Meg.
Dedicated to truth, justice,
and the American way.